how do you go about it
Where do you,
with all
where do you
the challenges?
start? Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the principles of shrinking elephants is actually around this idea of accepting multiple truths. And this is perhaps one of the hardest things for people to do. But if you come back to the conversation I was having before about the lenses that we wear and think about the elephant, and this is kind of conceptually perhaps the easiest way to think about this idea, is that the lenses that I wear mean that I sit at a particular angle on the elephant. And if I'm feeling uncomfortable about conversations that I'm having or not having with you, Nick, then what that is that your lenses are different to mine, and it means that you're sitting at a different angle on the elephant.
What if building stronger relationships could improve every aspect of your life? In this episode, I sit down with Genevieve Hawkins, an expert in helping people navigate change. With over 25 years of experience, she's seen how small shifts in how we approach challenges can lead to big changes in our personal lives. We explore how building stronger connections, having tough conversations, and embracing vulnerability can strengthen your mental resilience. Genevieve shares how these tools can help you to move through life's obstacles, no matter what they are. Welcome to Move Your Mind, where we uncover why you are holding yourself back from getting the life you want and what to do about it. With the help from high-achieving guests and experts in behavioural science, personal development, and the health and wellness space. Join us if you're ready to move out of your own way toward your ideal self. I'm your host, Nick Brax, and I've been working in the health and wellness space for the last 15 years, helping people find direction and gain the courage to take control of their life. My mission is simple: to help you learn everything that I wish I knew so you can become your ideal self. Lacking guidance, I spent the majority of my youth feeling lost and disempowered, which led to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and substance abuse. Looking back, I didn't have the vocabulary to communicate what I was experiencing. And as a man, I didn't resonate with the emotional language used in traditional therapy. I didn't need to talk about my feelings. I needed tangible solutions to guide me toward building a life I was proud of. If you can relate, then this podcast is for you. In this episode, we discuss how embracing curiosity can shift your mindset. If you're ready to take action and build a stronger mindset, then keep listening. Genevieve, so nice to meet you. Thank you for making the time to come on the podcast.
Thanks, Nick. It's lovely to meet you too, and I'm very excited.
So excited, yeah. I mean, we were talking before about, enjoying doing these things, but for me, hosting the podcast, my favorite thing is I get to just be educated for free and, get the time from people like yourself that have expertise in all these areas and sit down for, a focused amount of time and learn. It's amazing. So I love being able to do that.
Great job.
Yeah, love it. So we might just jump in by asking, so our listeners can get to know you. Can you give a bit of a background on yourself, how you came to be doing what you're doing and what that is?
Gosh. So that could be actually a podcast just in and of itself. Who am I? Where am I come from?
Condensed version.
Condensed, 25 words or less. So perhaps if I kind of start with what I do now and then kind of go back to then going, this is where I've come from. So I call myself a business advisor and conflict coach. So I specialise in helping individuals and organisations with regards to mental health, conflict and psychological safety. So that sort of tends to be my wheelhouse of the main sorts of things that I do. But so I've come from an occupational therapy background. So originally in the health system, have spent a fair significant time of my life in the workers' compensation area before getting into prevention, and then actually going on to big exec roles, running major functions that have nothing to do with that. Well, nothing to do with that as a specialty, but being a leader in places where I was recognising that need to help people to go, how do we actually create the right environment for people to be able to be their best, be their authentic selves, etc. And so, in fact, so I've written a couple of books, but this most recent one, which is called Shrinking Elephants, has really come out of my reflections with mentoring or coaching other people where they are struggling with conflict. And when I say conflict, it's not necessarily the big blown up stuff, but we can talk about that as well, but also the inner conflict of going, I'm not comfortable in this, I've got a proverbial elephant in the room, hence the Shrinking Elephants title, but not really feeling comfortable how to talk about it. And the number of people I kept on giving advice on how to actually step in and going, maybe I need to actually write a book and help a few more people doing it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, congratulations on writing 2 books. I wrote one book about 3 years ago, and I don't know if I'll do another one because what I learnt was it's very rewarding, but it's a lot of work. So
yeah, it is.
it's a huge amount of work, but no, amazing thing to do to get that message out there. So yeah, so interesting the work you're doing. So what is one of the main barriers to people, feeling that sort of inhibition to be their authentic self? What are some of the things that prevent that?
So at the heart of it is fear of non-acceptance. So we are tribal by nature, like think about you go back to, so we have an animal brain and a thinking brain, and that animal brain is constantly wired for our survival. And I mean, the animal brain does all the things that we're not conscious of. It helps us, our heart rate, our breath, our digestion, our sweating, everything to do with our body function. But it's also designed to help make sure that we are safe, because it wants the body to survive. And so part of that is that recognition right back from Neolithic time is that there is safety in numbers, which makes complete sense in the context. You're out in the wild. If you're on your own, that's a pretty scary and daunting place to be. But if you're with a tribe, then there's a greater capacity to go, okay, what are all the roles we play to manage this wild world? Well, we are still in a wild world. It's a very different wild world. Our brains actually can't pick up the difference between a physical and a psychological threat. Either way, there's this kind of alarm going, we've got a problem. And so that sense of not being able to be our authentic selves is really and not always conscious. So this is the interesting thing. Sometimes people are very consciously going, I'm trying to fit in and I need to do something to try and fit in. But actually a lot of it is subconscious or unconscious. And it is about, if I say this or if I act in this way, I could get rejected by others. In our animal brain are going, you've got to belong. That then stops us. Now, as I said, often when it's unconscious, particularly when it comes to conflict with others or disagreement with others, there's often justifications that we give ourselves on, it wasn't really the right time, or, they're going through hard times, or, this is happening, or this is happening. But ultimately, it's fear that drives those behaviours.
And how much of that is nature versus nurture? Because I know, if you've had experience enough times doing something and you've seen that, okay, like I've done this 500 times, and even though my instinct or, that unconscious things bringing up that fear, nothing bad's actually happening and I'm feeling more comfortable, or maybe, someone's had negative experiences in the past, so they are fearful. Is there a nature versus nurture component of that?
There is definitely. And the good thing is that nurture is a significant factor in it. And so the brain's neuroplasticity means we can learn to do things in a different way. So the nature bit is partly, as I talked about, the animal. So the animal brain will never change in terms of constantly seeking for threat. It's whether or not we can teach it to see the world differently, so that we're not perceiving threat, but rather we're perceiving opportunity. And so then the other thing from a nature perspective is just that our brains are all wired differently. Like you talk about neurodivergence and this idea, I mean, even when you talk about neurotypical, I go, what is neurotypical? Like we are all different. Our brains process information in different ways. So there's no doubt that even from when we're little, the way our brain is perceiving information is partly about nature. But nurture's a massive, massive impact. But so here's one of the interesting things. So I talk about the fact that we wear multiple lenses in front of our eyes, many, many lenses that we are just not aware of because they're so ingrained. So the most fascinating one is actually what's happened in the first couple of years of our life. Now, we don't have memories of those first couple of years of life, but they have imprinted a lens of how we learnt what safety was. So as a little baby, we can't express ourselves in any other way, but we're watching and taking in information and trying to work out what is safe or not. But then you layer on these lenses, what's happened in our childhood and upbringing that gives us a sense of how do you navigate the world to make it safe? What's happened in terms of major events in life that influence us? In fact, even with all of those, one of the interesting things is also what we call allostatic load, which is we can have just at that point in time, we're really tired, we're, we've got a few other things on our mind, and something happens which on an average day we wouldn't think was a problem, but actually on a particular day we get this much, much bigger reaction just because of our bodies, like our brains going, this is too much. There's too much. I've got enough on the world as it's going. So long answer to go, nurture is the most significant factor. Nature will always be there, but those lenses are imprinted. And to get better at conflict is actually about how do we learn the lenses that we're wearing. And some of those lenses we can learn and go, interesting, and I can take that lens off now because I now see the world differently and I don't have it. Other lenses, we just need to learn to recognise they are there. And so when we start behaving in a particular way, we can go, hang on a minute, that's my lens that's giving me that perception. I need to take a moment and go, maybe I could think about this in a different way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I guess that can be the frustrating thing for people. They can become aware of these things and have the intention to change it, but you stay sort of stuck because it's uncomfortable or you try and you don't get the result. And it's just difficult to, I guess like mindfulness sort of practices, it's hard to, on a regular basis, have the discipline to be over and over again, reminding yourself of these things or whatever it is. Like, how would you... what would you recommend to anyone like wanting to go through that sort of process? How do you go about it when
where do you start?
Yeah. And how do you stick to it?
Oh my God! Actually, gosh, that is a book. Like there's lots of detail in that. Where do we start? Where do we start with it all? I think part of it is part of it is just an awareness thing. So it starts with recognizing this idea, and in fact I talk about this as one of the principles of shrinking elephants. Excuse me. Oh dear. One of the principles of shrinking elephants is actually around this idea of accepting multiple truths. And this is perhaps one of the hardest things for people to do. But if you come back to the conversation I was having before about the lenses that we wear and think about the elephant, and this is kind of conceptually perhaps the easiest way to think about this idea, is that the lenses that I wear mean that I sit at a particular angle on the elephant. And if I'm feeling uncomfortable about conversations that I'm having or not having with you, Nick, then what that is that your lenses are different to mine, and it means that you're sitting at a different angle on the elephant. And it means that it's not that I'm right. So this is what we come into with that sense of fear is not only do I not want to have the conversation, but we seek safety, and there's safety in feeling that we're right. And so when I sit there and go, I'm right, like, Nick, this is exactly what's happened. Like, mate, why can't you see that? Because this is what's happened, is me in a fear state going, I'm right. I am right. I can see this. Now, again, when I say fear, I want to keep reminding the listeners, because people go, oh, I'm not afraid of stuff, going, actually, it may not be consciously you thinking that it's fear. But at the heart, this is a really, I guess, challenging concept, but an interesting concept to think about. Right down when you boil it down to where our decisions come from and what we choose to do, come from a base of fear or love. Now, that sounds really quite interesting to kind of grapple with. But if you think about love, and not, sometimes that's kind of an interesting concept for people, like what does love mean? But think about that as openness and curiosity and willingness to learn. So a space of going, I'm moving forward, I'm moving to something, I'm interested, whereas fear is I'm right, you're wrong, I've got the answers, I know what life's all about, this is what we're doing. So you might not be sitting there going fear, you might be going, I'm okay, like I've got it, I get all the stuff here. But actually what it is it's armor that's placed around us going, this is the direction we need to have. What we actually need to do is get into this space of curiosity. And so that ability to start with this idea, can I accept multiple truths? Can I be in a place where I'm struggling to understand your perspective, but I have to start with accepting you're wearing different lenses to me, and it's not that my lenses are right and your lenses are wrong, they're just different. So I need to get curious. And one of the best kind of curious inquiries is to go, can you help me understand? Can you help me understand what's going on? Now, here's the thing though, if you're in a heightened state of I'm right and I'm feeling that tension, and I'm sitting there with my arms crossed going, well, help me understand, Nick. You're not exactly going to be in a space to go, how do I do that? So there's some really interesting things to keep coming back to. How do we foster curiosity in ourselves first? And whilst, like, gosh, there's lots of different avenues we can go in there. So, you know, bear with me a bit, but please interrupt me and go, hang on a minute, let's go down that rabbit hole. But
no, keep going. Yeah, it's like
so this first part is when we're caught in so it's a cortisol rush. So our animal brain floods us with some cortisol when we're feeling unsafe, when we're feeling that sense of I'm right, you're wrong. There's some cortisol in our brain, and the cortisol is basically our animal brain going, there's a threat, you know, what are you going to do? You're going to fight, or you're going to run away, or you're going to freeze, what are you going to do? And what we need to get better at is recognizing when that comes up. So, you know, and I used to say to people, you know, recognize when you're suddenly feeling tense, or recognize when you're feeling this emotion that's coming up that says, you know, ugh, or that you find yourself about to say or saying, I'm right, I'm right here, and feeling that frustration. Those moments are ones of, it's just your animal brain, mate. It's your animal brain sitting there going, you're stuck with the animal brain thinking this is a threat. So the first kind of thing is going, how do I just get back into my body a bit? Like, how do I actually convince my body it's not a threat? Like, how do I tell my brain it's okay, this is not a threat, this is a moment to get curious because we've just stumbled upon an elephant. And so depending on where you're at, because some of these things will work only when you kind of on your own as compared to with someone, because I say to people, you know, sometimes literally just shaking out your arms and your legs, it's kind of going, okay, cortisol, just kind of, you know, push it out. There's an interesting thing about the vagus nerve. So one of the nerves that we have in the body, the vagus nerve is the most extensive one that covers quite a lot of the body, and 80% of the information that the vagus nerve is sending back up to the brain, sending up to the brain rather than down from the brain. And so it's basically caught in this cycle that the brain's going, it's a threat, and the vagus nerve's going, yes, all the muscles are tense, and yes, we can feel this problem. So it's like, whew, how do we breathe? How do we breathe slowly? How do we, you know, like we can tap, so we can actually tap the vagus nerve. So one of the things is like basically let's thump the sternum just a few times here to kind of help it there. How do we, like one of the other interesting ones is like put your thumbs out in front of you, keep your head straight, and track your eyes around a circle with your thumbs, like each of them, and keep just sort of doing that a few times. But you're moving your head. Keep your head straight. Move your eyes round to and then down and back in, and go right down low. So you're going right low and then back up to the middle. And what
your head.
It is hard. So there's a bit of practice with it. But what it's doing is, it's getting you actually concentrating on something else other than the emotion that's there. But it's also helping your brain to go, have a look around here, mate. Like, it's fine. Like, there's really no physical threat there. So it's like, how can you kind of get yourself back into that moment to then be able to go, okay, I feel a bit more grounded. How do I then find connection with you? And how do I make sure that I'm reminding myself that I actually like you rather than that you're a threat? So it's like my body's kind of going, okay, all right, this is all right. I feel a bit more grounded. How do I then get in? So what we're wanting to try and do is actually get our animal brain to elicit a couple of chemicals. We want them to elicit some oxytocin in each of us and some serotonin. So oxytocin releases when we are part of a tribe. So we're together and we've got a common goal or a common sense of being together. And so one of the things that's really useful in that is knowing what you've got in common with someone, that actually you go, this is the stuff that we know. So you go, oh, actually, why don't we change the topic for a moment and let's talk about football on the weekend, or whatever it might be. Laughter is a really great way of getting oxytocin in. And it's actually often quite useful to use in the language about the elephant, because to be able to go, oh, hey, guess what? We've got an elephant, haven't we? Like just that little bit of laughter is our brains going, okay, if we both laugh together, all of a sudden we're on the same side because we're seeing something in that same way. And the serotonin comes from actually feeling valued. And so there's an interesting thing about in that moment, is there something you can do to help that person so that person goes, oh, wow, that's really great. Like, I really appreciate the fact that you helped me. So they get a serotonin hit. But likewise, you actually get a serotonin hit by the fact that you've helped them. Now, it could be as little as just saying, how about I just make us a cup of tea, or how about I pour us a beer, or not that I want to encourage alcohol in the context of managing conflict, but, something just little, like it's not I need to go and do something major before we, get into it. But it's these, what it is circuit breakers. You're trying to get those circuit breakers in so that both of you are in a space where the cortisol's calmed down. We've got this lovely hit of oxytocin and serotonin to kind of go, okay, I'm feeling safe in this moment. And then we have a capacity to get curious. And curiosity, like learning, is food for the brain. And so kind of one of the things that you always need to think about at that moment where you go, God, this feels uncomfortable, is then going, I'm feeding my brain. Let's get curious. Let's get curious together.
If you're looking to make a change, to lose weight, to get toned, to gain self-confidence, all in just 24 minutes a day, then go no further. You can check out the Move Your Mind community by going to nickbrax.start.page.
So that capacity then to be able to go, Nick, there's an elephant in the room here, and clearly we're seeing things from different perspectives. Now, what you need to have the generosity, if you're the one trying to help to orchestrate it, to not start with, so I want to tell you my view of the elephant. What you actually want to do is start with, can you help me understand your perspective? And what you then want that other person to do in return is if they feel truly listened to. And so this is a challenge. While you're explaining your perspective, you can't be going, well, that's rubbish.
Yeah.
And getting the tension back up again. You've got to keep going back to, you're another human being, you're in my tribe, I really value you. I'm listening because I do genuinely want to understand. So help me understand that perspective. And to be able to listen and nod and go, yeah, okay, all right, interesting. And you go, I can understand now. Like I've walked around the elephant and I can see this different perspective. Could I now walk you back around to my side of the elephant? And can I help you do that? And that'd be great. Can you help me understand your perspective on the elephant?
Yeah.
And then off we go from that.
It's fascinating. I mean, this, like you're saying, this could probably be talked about for an entire podcast episode on a series of them. But it's, there's so many levels to it, and it relates to everything.
There are.
It just relates to everything.
Yeah.
And for me, the thing that helps the most is exercise. Like if I'm going down that path, if I just, use that as a circuit breaker, get moving, get the blood flowing, it's night and day. It's crazy how big of a change it can make. And you don't think it will when you're in that, like you're talking about. Like if I've ever been in a conflict, or even if I'm debating something with my partner and the two of us are getting, you can stay in it infinitely, or you just break it and then you you come to that realization of, oh, okay, like we're not being logical here. Let's go back and talk from that standpoint. But I mean, I guess what you're talking about. Sorry, you go.
Yeah, no, sorry. Just jumping. So a couple of things on there, because one, when you're saying this isn't logical and we need to get back to logical, and this is a really interesting thing with it too, because actually, so we're feeling beings who think, not thinking beings who feel. And if we want to actually have a good logical conversation about what we need to do with things, we actually need to feel a sense of connection first. So when you find yourself, and so if you're if you're talking to your partner and your partner's getting really emotional and you're like, why are they getting all emotional? Like, I'm fine. I just want to talk logically about this.
Yeah.
You trying to talk logically and go, why don't we just talk logically, can actually add fuel to the fire. Because what do you mean? I'm being logical. You're not being logical because you're not listening to me. Like, So
and it's like it compounds when that happens. Yeah,
it compounds. It absolutely does. And so we need to understand that. That's why I sort of come back to that serotonin and oxytocin feeling. Like we need to come back to a sense of safety with each other before we can then go, let's have a conversation. So to your point then about exercise, so one of the most important things I said we can do is to recognize when it's building up in our body and have that capacity to say, and in fact, when I encourage people, I've done this in the work setting, whether it's work or home, there are moments in which I get to a point where I can say, I just need to take a pause for a moment, because I'm recognizing that I'm starting to feel this tension in my, however you want to describe it, I'm feeling the tension building up my body, or I'm feeling that I'm about to say something that I might regret.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do this. Can we please take a break for a moment and then let's come back to the conversation. I just need to reset myself first.
Yeah.
So, and it's okay. Like, even when the other person's doing that. So when the other person's being really emotional and you go, I think they need a break. The worst thing you can do is say, you need a break. You need a break. What you can actually, though, go is recognize you're going to need that break because if they keep going, you're going to explode even if you feel calm now.
Yeah.
So that capacity to go, I'm just recognizing that I have a need just to take a breather. How about we take a breather? Now, sometimes that breather is just going, actually, all we needed was saying that. All we needed was saying that for us to kind of look at each other and go, it is a bit crazy, isn't it? Let's have a let's have a laugh. Let's remember that we actually really like each other. Let's go back to, these things I really value about, what's going on and who you are and what you are. Actually, we're okay, we can go back. But sometimes what we need to recognize is that emotion is built up so much that just taking a short break isn't enough. And exercise is a fantastic way of helping to get the cortisol out of our body. So it's actually, physiologically, it's then going back into where literally it's sweating it's out of us, if you think kind of it that way, of going, and it's because it's getting the body back into the present moment.
Yeah.
And exercise, I want to kind of go, exercise is a whole range of things, because there are some people that you go, well, I love running and so I just want to go out and run and I'm fine. Or I love the gym and I go and do a gym session and then I'm okay. But there could be other people listening that go, oh, God, I hate exercise.
Yeah.
I hate exercise. But think about exercise is it's movement.
Yeah.
It's movement so that your body recognizes that you're okay. So whether that's then it's walking the dog, it's getting some whatever music is actually a great way to get some oxytocin in yourself and settle down, because again, you feel like a tribe when you're rhythm with the music that you want to listen to. And so sometimes when you're angry, that actually, not that I love headbanging hard rock music, but some people do, and go, sometimes what you want is an angry song or two, and you want to just want to headbang and yell to the song. That's actually really quite therapeutic and good for you to get it out. Other times you go, actually what I need is something that then helps to then calm me back down.
Yeah. And so really anything, whatever, like there's no right or wrong. It's just what works.
You do you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do you. So that, one of the most important things. So our animal brains are all the same in terms of the chemicals that they release and the way in which they seek for pattern. But actually what I detect as a threat and what you detect as a threat can be different because of the lenses that we wear. And how I release that cortisol from my body could look somewhat different to how you release cortisol from your body. But what we have in common is we both need to release the cortisol from our body.
Yeah, exactly. And from, often if I'm feeling stuck, even just literally getting up from the desk and going, for a walk outside, or just changing anything, even just going and making a coffee
Yep.
or something, just any
Yep.
form of change makes such a difference.
It does. It does. And it's grounding ourselves back. Let's just get back into bodies. On good days, you can't always do this when it's pouring down with rain, etc. Actually, one of the really interesting ways of fast tracking this, and again, you have to actually have a garden nearby or in your backyard to be able to do this, but barefoot in the grass.
Yeah.
So there is something about just standing literally on the earth, rather than on a concrete floor or, whatever it might be, and barefoot, so that our feet can kind of go, it's all right. We're okay. We're safe. We're grounded here. Okay, now let's get back into how do I get curious and have that conversation.
Yeah.
But at the heart of those, to come back to instead of thinking about fear and love, because sometimes that can be quite abstract for people, it's kind of thinking about, openly toward versus, backing back into safety.
Yeah.
And backing back into safety is kind of like, I'm safe back here in my own little space and I don't really want to know about anyone else. And, that's kind of, I'm back here, versus actually,
yeah,
there's something in here that I need to learn. How can I get curious?
Are you interested in joining a community of like-minded people who are on the same journey as you are? Even though you're the one that needs to do the work, you don't have to go it alone. You can find all of the information at nickbrax.start.page. Yeah, I love that. I love the practicality of everything you're talking about, because I think that's a big thing that I find a lot of our listeners are wanting to hear more of. How can I action some of these things, especially when it comes to mental health? A lot of the time people get overwhelmed or frustrated because they're just like, okay, great, that sort of makes sense, but how do I actually do it? How do I change that? So I love the fact that a lot of this stuff you're talking about, it makes perfect sense, what you can actually do to try and start changing that.
Yeah, I think, I'm sure that's my OT background coming out, because OTs are always very practical in there. How do you apply this to daily living? What do we need to do? But it is so important, because I think there's so much kind of, well, I'm struggling, but yeah, what is it that I can do? And then someone goes, this is a solution, and you do this, and then people go, well, that doesn't work, or that's not me, or what's going on. And I find that helping people just understand a bit of that science really helps. And in fact, if people want to go onto my website, so genevievehawkins.com.au, there's in the resources section, there's a single page actually where I give it's a picture of what I call a mental health pie. And so it's saying, here are these things that you need to be able to do to look after your mental health. And again, same sort of principle for everyone, that says we have cortisol in our body and we need to learn to recognize when it's coming up. We need good levels of oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine. And dopamine is it gets a bad rap because people talk about dopamine addictions associated with social media, with gambling. It is a problem, but it's not because it exists. It's like with cortisol. You go, well, cortisol's a problem. You go, no, it's not. There's reasons why these chemicals exist. But what we do have is a society that's stuck in this loop of just cortisol and dopamine.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm feeling stressed. How do I relieve that stress? I then actually go and get a dopamine hit, and it feels great for a bit. But of course, then the next stress comes up. Well, I need more dopamine. And that dopamine is this, it feels great because it's this reward drug. It's like, we've worked out a pattern. There's been some novelty and interest and surprise, and we've got a great dopamine hit, and that feels good. But actually getting dopamine from social media, things like social media, gambling, other addictions, is not actually healthy for us. what we need is to be able to elicit dopamine through curiosity. So learning, like consciously going, there's something to learn here, you get this really great rush of dopamine.
Yeah.
But looking after our mental health is actually going, I actually need to balance all of these different chemicals that are in my animal brain by consciously choosing to do things that work for me. So that page, which is actually from my first book, but it's just a useful kind of, here's some ideas on the things that you might want to do in your pie so that you're better connected to yourself, better connected to others, focusing on contribution to others. So connection to others is about being in the tribe. Contribution is about my value in the tribe. How do I help in that tribe? And curiosity.
Yeah.
So that's the secret ingredients to really helping to optimize our mental health. Not just, prevent a problem, but really go, how do we keep feeling good? But what works for me won't work for you necessarily because of the lenses we wear and how our brains are wired. But we all need those chemicals.
Exactly. I think if anyone's saying, I've got the solution, this is what you need to do, it's probably bullshit because, like you say, it's going to be different for everyone. There's core sort of
different
principles, but we're all going to have different things, different ways that we cope and learn and everything. So that's really interesting.
And life's an experiment. Like it's not, life is messy. It's not certain. All sorts of things can get thrown at us.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves in life is to go, how do I keep remaining curious to me?
Yeah.
How do I keep remaining curious to try and understand my own brain? How do I make sure that's where I get my dopamine from, is to be able to keep trying to understand, and so you can have conversations with your brain. I know that sounds kind of funny, but you can, because our thinking brain can just run rife. Like it goes, I've picked up this thing from the animal brain and I'm stuck in this story.
Yeah.
And the ability to get curious about yourself is fascinating. To go, I have a thought that comes in that says, oh God, here's Nick again, and I really don't like him. And you go, that's such an unhelpful brain. That's such an unhelpful thought, brain.
Yeah.
Let's think about a more useful thought. What's a more useful thought? Or to go, that is fascinating that you think that. Like, what's the story you're telling yourself? Like, where does that story come from? What have you seen that you think that, in fact, I probably should have said the other way, Nick doesn't like me, because this is a really interesting one to me. Go, Nick doesn't like me. Now, if I've got this story that's in my head, all of a sudden this is a lens that comes over me to say, you don't like me.
Yeah.
Therefore, my animal brain is seeing every one of your behaviours through that lens as saying, you don't like me. And I can easily, this is like, like when maybe you don't read the stars, but if you ever read a horoscope and people read, go, oh yeah, that replies to me, and you're going, make it apply to you.
Yeah.
Like you think about something, that specific thing in that, but that relates to me. That's what our animal brain does. So I go, you don't like me. Everything I see you do, I go, see, doesn't like me. That's what I'm saying here. Whereas what we need to be able to do is get curious to go, where's that story come from anyway? Yes, you think all of these things, but actually, what if you were wrong?
Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, please click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram at NickBrax. I really appreciate your ongoing support.
What if you were wrong? What's an alternative story? How about the story is you do like me? So how about I go looking for things that say you like me? Because essentially what I've done is I'm taking off these lenses and I'm putting on a different set of lenses, and I want to see your behaviours and interpret them through that, that lens. So like a classic one is an insecure, so someone hasn't called you back. And let's say, like it's a job application, right? You're trying to get a job and you were expecting to hear on a particular day and you haven't heard. And your animal brain can go, and it's someone that you know well, and you kind of thought, so if you know that person well and you're really confident in going, I've done all I can and I actually reckon it's good. They go, okay, I haven't had the call, but it's probably because they've got caught up in other stuff. So it'll be fine. I'll get the call and, it'll come the next day. Whereas if I'm going, I don't know, maybe I haven't got the job, the minute it's past the time that they said, oh, there you go, I haven't got the job. They haven't rung me, haven't got the job. So, our brains can go in crazy directions.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And so many levels to that as well, because it's like with visualization where it sounds like it's a bit airy fairy, but really it's because if you're picturing that you're going to achieve this goal or whatever it is, your actions are going to align with that. But if you feel like, no, everything's too hard, I'm a failure, I can't do this, your actions will align with that, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's sort of this.
Yeah.
But it's how important is accountability in doing this? Because I know from my experience, I've done a fair bit of work on myself, but probably the most growth for me came from my current partner. She's a neuroscientist, and she sort of challenges a lot of things, and was not. I couldn't get away with a lot of my patterns. And a lot of that, she was actually very interested, by the way, with that I'm interviewing you. I showed her a bit about you, but a lot of the time I'd be wanting to hit my head against a wall because she's calling me out on these things that I'll do. But then I'll step back and be like, oh, wow, okay, I've been telling myself this same story for so long and I haven't changed it, even though I thought I advanced in all these different ways, and gradually start to undo them. But, for me, I've definitely needed that outside intervention as well as doing it myself.
Yeah, so I don't know whether I'd call that accountability. Well, you could sit there and say it's an accountability coach.
Yeah.
And so actually it is really, really important. Look, I think that there's a certain, you can't avoid doing the work. If you really want to make the most of it, you have to be able to do the inner work. You've got to be able to keep challenging yourself. But because of the lenses that we wear, we are blind to, we're blind to the impacts that we have on others. We're blind to some of our faulty thinking because the lenses are going, oh, that is the way you think about stuff. Like, what's going on? So being able to have someone that can be a reflection back of how your lenses and your behavior, and therefore your behavior, because they can't see your lenses, all they can see is your behavior. They're going, well, you're saying this or you're doing this, and the impact on me is this, is a really useful way of you being able to get that insight to go, oh, crap. Right, okay, because so we judge ourselves by our intent, others by their impact on us. Like, so I don't know what's going on inside your head, but if you do something and I feel crap afterwards, I'm kind of going, man, it just made me feel crap. Actually, you didn't intend to make me feel crap. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole, oh my God, this goes down another rabbit warren of going, if I'm feeling crap, there's actually a little bit of going, what's the story in my head as well? But back to the general sort of question about saying how important is someone else. We need good people around us. Like we need people who, I talk about the idea of who's on your board. Yeah. And the thing is, like, if you're in an organisation as a CEO, good organisations have a good board around them, and that board actually is a sounding board on all the different sorts of areas of running a business that you need to know about. From a personal life perspective, we need a board. So, I would encourage people to say you need more than one person because you need different skill sets at different times. Yeah. And so, you need the person that inspires you, that wants you to stretch and think about, we could do this, we could do these things. You need the person that can really remind you of your strengths and go, when you've fallen off your bike, they help you to get back on and go, you know what, Nick, let me just remind you of all these awesome things and how you help others and how you contribute to what's going on. You need the person that actually points out those flaws, those challenges. So that's actually a really, really critical part of it all. Yeah. You need that person who holds you to account, that is like your personal trainer that goes, come on, you said you're going to do this. Where's that? What are you going to do? Etc. Yeah. You need the person, and often that is, it depends on whether you've got a partner, but if you've got a good relationship, it can be a friend as much as a partner, a life partner, is someone who sees the potential in you and helps you to kind of think about your future self and wanting to meet your future self and where you're at. And you need laughter. So you need funny friends. Like, you've got to have that capacity to go, I need a circuit breaker, and laughter is one of the key things there. But yes, we're tribal. We need our tribe to continue to help us be better, but we have to also be willing to go inside ourselves to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so easy to be stuck with, you could have toxic people around you, or you could have people where you're all in that same mindset. So no one is really thinking or acknowledging there's anything that needs to be changed, and you're stuck in that cycle.
Yeah.
It's so important.
God, that's a whole other podcast. But yes, yes.
So important to acknowledge that.
Groupthink is a challenge. And that's part of what we're seeing in the context of social media as well, is that the algorithms in social media help to draw us into our own kind of, I'm going to say, no, I've got lost track of the word of what it is, because we're in our own sound booth, but that's like not the word. Echo chamber. An echo chamber. Yeah. So we get caught in an echo chamber, and that helps us feel secure. We're like, I'm safe because look at all these people around me. I'm right. But the moment we're going, I'm right, is the moment that you go, look out, because that is a protective mechanism.
You're losing critical thinking, when you do that. And I guess so much of,
you're not being curious enough.
Yeah, and it's so relevant, to the political environment that you're talking about, and this whole polarization and, I'm right, you're wrong, and no one can be, that's just so unhealthy, and it
is so unhealthy. Far, so. And particularly in that context where you see, God help us going into politics here, but often are almost like a 50-50 of, votes in different ways on things, is going, what we have is parties that aren't able to listen to each other and to be able to go, there's this just big elephant, which is the messy way of how do we navigate, our societies, our communities, and curiosity is at the heart of that. Curiosity, so that we can go, I would feel far more comfortable if the world operated this way, but I appreciate that not everyone sees that. So how do we help each other to work our way around the elephant so that you can then shrink it to a more manageable size, when it doesn't seem as big, because I get that here are all these different perspectives and we can navigate our way around it. Not easy.
Yeah.
There's no simple answer, but curiosity to ourselves, curiosity to our relationships, and curiosity to the broader organisation or broader world that we operate in is key to our mental health and to our future.
Exactly. It seems like that's the only way to make that change, because these things aren't going to go away. Social media is not going to go away. It's very easy, if you're talking politically, or any sort of leader can, if we go back to the love or hate, you can, if you want to be a leader and be trying to prey on the fear side of things, love or fear, you can use that as a tool you can weaponize that to win people over, so it's like, we can't really control what is going to happen around us, but we can control how we, respond to things. So anyway,
how we respond.
We're going, I think, a bit over time here, and there's so much I would be able to talk to you about if we had more time. But anyway, so you've you mentioned the books. You've got 2 books. Can you just give a quick overview of the books and let our listeners know where they can go if they want to, look up your work and purchase the books or anything?
Yeah. So the 2 books are Mentally at Work and then Shrinking Elephants. So Mentally at Work is all about, then let's have a look at individual mental health in the context of conversations with each other, and then in terms of the broader workplace. And then the second one's called Shrinking Elephants, which is about how do we actually understand conflict, and in a way that sees it as an opportunity, and how do we get better at the conversations that we need to have with it. And we certainly talked about this earlier, Nick, before we were on the podcast, but they are written for workplace, the context of workplace, but the techniques, etc., in it, as you would hear from today in the conversations, it doesn't matter whether you're inside or outside the workplace. All of these techniques apply. You can find them at your favourite online bookstore. They're in Audible, Kindle, or your Audible e-read and paperback. Of course, I would say go to Amazon, only because then you go, and if you like it, put a review on it. Always good to have that. And then you can find me at genevievehawkins.com.au. So I've got some resources there and other further contact details of what I do.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So we'll have all of those links in the show notes. So make sure to check all of those out. And we finish every episode with 5 closing questions. These can be sort of quick answers for you. Whatever comes to mind. I know we're going a bit over time and probably got to let you
go. No.
Nothing too crazy, but first one is, what's your best childhood memory that comes to mind?
Oh my God, best childhood memory. I'm one of 9 children.
Wow.
Being in the swimming pool in the backyard with my dad, playing what we used to call pussy in the corner, but it was like this crazy whirlwind game of trying to, like musical chairs but in a pool.
There you go.
Lots of laughter. Love
it. What do you think's currently the biggest burden on mental health in society?
Oh God, most current burden. I actually think our social media.
Yeah.
I actually think there's a great book called Stolen Focus. I don't know whether people have sort of heard of that or read that, but that's actually part of our challenge, is saying that there's these societal pressures that are being placed on our brains are being. In fact, I shouldn't say just social media, internet as a whole.
Yeah.
We have the world in the palm of our hands. Our animal brains are trying to make sense of stuff, and they're feeling overwhelmed by the sheer level of information that we could possibly take in, and they're not coping with how to clump it.
I'd say 95% of the guests will say social media is the biggest issue. It makes sense. What's your personal definition of happiness?
Personal definition of happiness. I love that. I think feeling a sense every day of joy and awe and gratitude, regardless of what happens in the outside world.
Yeah, that's great. Well, two more. If you could give one piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, what would that be?
Oh gosh, so many pieces of advice. I think to say, like, you're good enough. Like trust who you are as a human being, and life is an experiment. Go and experiment, but don't. And in fact, actually, it's part of saying, work to find safety within yourself. Don't look for it within the reassurances of others.
Yeah, I love that one. Well, final one. What are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? Gosh.
Lots of things. You got plenty.
Lots of things. Yeah, maybe my kids. The fact that I've got now adult kids and I've survived raising them, and my husband and I've survived raising them, and they're now in their 20s and experimenting in the world themselves.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for making the time to come on here. I've learnt so much. I think we'll have to do round 2 and 3 to go through all these topics. But yeah.
Love it. Fantastic. Thanks, Nick. I really enjoyed the conversation too.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Genevieve Hawkins, for joining me today and offering your insights. And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and any suggestions of topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to leave me a comment or just send me a DM. Your feedback is always appreciated.
Please don't forget to click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram. It really makes a difference. Thank you so much.